I'm starting this project with this little box from the dollar store, and I just need the lid, and that will be the perfect base for me to work off of because it's the right size, and it still gives me some room under it for electronics later. For the shrine itself, I'm using this 1-inch XPS foam, and this is the basic shape that I came up with. Using my utility knife and a sharp blade, I cut out the shape, and then using that same blade, I'm cutting down the sides until I get the shape that I want. I use some sandpaper and take off that texture that's on the surface, and then using a sanding sponge, I'll round over some of those edges. For the crystal in the middle, I'll be using this UV resin and this pigment that was also from the dollar store, and this Sculpey mold kit. And I'll be using that crystal right there. I start by pouring out some resin, and then I'll mix in the color, and I ended up doing 2 drops, and that gave me the color that I wanted. I start the cure with a UV light, and then I just put it out on my balcony and let the sun do the rest. This is just dollar store foam core, and the cheaper the better, because the cheaper stuff, the paper actually comes off easier. And I'm using this foam core to build some stairs that will go up to the shrine. I glue everything together with this foam-safe superglue. This superglue won't dissolve the foam, but normal superglue will, so you have to be careful. I decided I would add a couple of rocks at the base just to break things up, and then I cut out a space for them in those foam stairs. Again, using more of that foam-safe superglue to glue everything down. I seal the foam using Mod Podge. My UV resin was still curing outside, and so I'm using this stand-in, which is the exact same size and shape, it's just a previous cast, and I mark out where I want the crystal to go. I'm going to be using one of these blue LEDs to light the crystal from the back, and so I need to take out enough space to fit that entire LED inside. On my first attempt, I used this portable soldering iron to melt the hole, but I went a little too much and melted more than I wanted, so I made a second one and just used my Dremel tool. I then drill a hole from the base up into the hole for the LED to run all the wires. I'm painting the interior now because I won't have access to it once I glue the LED and the crystal in. Speaking of gluing in the LED, I'm just using some hot glue to glue it down. As long as it's not too hot, it won't melt the foam. Here's the crystal now that it's fully cured, but as you can see, it's a little too clear. So I'm going to rough the back with some sandpaper, and then I will cover it with hot glue. And I'm gluing this crystal straight down to the LED, so I'm covering the entire thing in hot glue so that it diffuses better. To fill the gaps between the crystal and the foam, I'm using this stone clay, making these little noodles and then pressing that into the gap. I can then blend the clay into the surrounding foam. Using a piece of aluminum foil in a ball, I'm adding some extra texture to the foam. Moving on to the candles, I'm just using a piece of styrene tubing, and then to make it look a little more like an actual candle, I'm using that same UV resin as before, and making it look like the wax is melting and dripping down the side of the candle. I make a few with different size tubing, and then I paint everything white. I also use a gray contrast to make the candles look a bit older and bring out those wax strips. These tiny little pre-wired white LEDs fit perfectly in the styrene tubes. Then for the flames, I'm using the same technique that I came up with when I built my Nausicaa diorama. I'm adding that same UV resin layer upon layer, and I cure after each layer to build it up. To get that flame-like shape, I cure the resin right in front of the UV light, slowly pulling the resin away, and that gets me that flame-like shape. I then drill holes in the base for the blue LED wires as well as all the candles. For the first layer of paint, I'm using a mix of black acrylic paint, Mod Podge, and modeling paste, and I stipple it on using a makeup brush. For the stone color, I'm using a mix of dark and light gray, and I purposely mix it really bad so that when I apply it, it gives me some variation. Once that clear coat is dry, I can move on to weathering. This is a black wash. It's a mixture of black acrylic paint and isopropyl alcohol, and I just cover the entire thing with it. I then come in with a paper towel and dab away some of the excess. And if you take away too much, you can always go back in with your brush and add a bit more. To finish off the painting, I add a dry brush of light gray. It's the same light gray I used in the base coat, and this will just bring out some of those details and add more realism. Adding all this moss was one of my favorite parts of the build. This is just some fine modeling turf that I had in this nice green color, and it's mixed with water and Mod Podge. It dried a nice mossy green color, but it's a bit too even, so I take some watered down brown paint and make it look a bit more natural. The crystal was a bit too smooth in my opinion, so I rough it up with a sanding stick, and then I will use some of my favorite Mod Podge and give it a kind of cool ripple effect. Now I've just got to wrangle all these wires, hook up my battery, and this project is basically done. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed, please consider dropping a like, consider subscribing. I've got a bunch of other videos on my channel, and if you enjoyed this one, you'll probably like a few of my other ones as well. As always, I will leave links in the description below to all the tools and materials that I used during these builds. If you'd like to support me more directly via Patreon, I also have links to that in the description and at the end of this video. Absolutely no pressure to join, but if you do, you get some cool perks like behind the scenes footage and a shout out in every one of my videos. Thank you again so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.